Everything else between didn't matter. No, it did. He racked up over 3,300 flying hours in various types of military aircraft. General McDew assumed command of TRANSCOM in August of 2015 and has proven himself a strong backer of NDTA and is an articulate champion and our foremost leader for the most capable transportation logistics enterprise in the world. He understands the words are important, sir. I know you've worked on yours. He understands the importance of strong relations across the enterprise and believes the industry is the fourth component of TRANSCOM. The logistics enterprise is in high gear as we speak. There are many pressures around the world, and I'm grateful he is at the helm. Sir, the logistics enterprise is assembled as you requested. Please join me in a warm welcome for the commander of TRANSCOM, our commander, General Darren McDew.
Thanks, brother.
Had to do it. That's important.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
I think this is yours.
I think so. I hope so. It's always better when you recognize your remarks. I have never seen these before, which should make a very interesting morning. Let me start with thank you, Andy, for that introduction. It was years before I could actually call him Andy. He is a VMI class of 80. I'm VMI class of 1982. If you know nothing about VMI, rank means nothing. Class means everything. So I typically do push-ups on his behalf. So when he stopped me before he got here, he knew that this meant I was going to stop. And I did. But thank you very much. I've got a couple things. It always freaks me out every single time I stand up here for a couple reasons. One, I believe this is a very important session. Very important session. I also have great respect for the people in this audience, beyond just General Handy. There are other people in the audience I respect as well. I actually respect every last one of you and appreciate what you've been doing for all of us. But I take this very seriously and my obligation to do a couple things. It said keynote. This is really not as much a keynote as it is I have some things I need to do. There's some things I will talk about, and then we'll get on with the rest of the events. First, welcome to the Fall Meeting 2017. And good morning. Thank you for that wonderful, kind, and warm introduction. I did not see that coming from you 35 years ago. It's hard to believe that we've had another year pass, and it's really good to be back amongst friends and colleagues. This morning, my address is going to hopefully get you thinking a little bit, but let me get to a couple things first. I always start with a thank you very much, and I owe you that as well. It's been a great event, and there have been a lot of folks that have put this event on, and it's not lost on me that there's a lot of hard work to get us to this point every single year. We still have a lot of stuff to solve, but I want to begin with a couple thank yous, and I think I've got that here in my remarks if I can find it. You heard 70 classes. That's a big deal. And if you remember where we started with those classes, it's an even bigger accomplishment. Last year, I challenged everybody in the front row to teach a class, including the Virginia Tech graduate. I'm still quite proud of you, man. To get as far as you've gotten without an actual college degree is downright... I've heard that Virginia Tech is this close to being accredited. I mean, it is really good. He's, by the way, ATA is coming up, so he'll get me back. There are a lot of good folks, and I won't go through all the introductions because you guys have done that through here, but I'm very, very proud of every single person who stepped up this year to offer a class. We went from 8 senior leaders teaching a class to 16 this past year. That's pretty darn remarkable. We have all of our component commanders that are sitting here. and they're very talented and sharp-looking individuals that are sitting up front. And if you've never heard me say this before, the fourth component, and you heard it earlier, and why do I call you our fourth component? It's not just because it's a catchy buzz phrase, which it is. It's because your readiness, your viability, and your capacity is as important to me as MSC, AMC, and SDDC. It is because what you do is vital to our national defense. Now, I know most of you understand your impact on national security, but not every single person in this country understands your impact on national security. So I thank all those industry leaders who took the challenge and also brought value to this year's Transportation Academy. I understand that not everybody could get into every meeting they wanted to yesterday, but I guess that's the way it is. General Handy, again, apparently they didn't let you into mine, and you thought it was because the room was full. No, I said, don't let him in. This goes back a long ways, trust me. I've got a number of names here. I'm going to forego many of them, but I want to get to a couple newcomers on the team very quickly. You all know Dee Mewborn, you all know Kurt Ryan, you all know Dewey Everhart, you know Dan Emmerman, if you've not had a chance to meet him, in command of our Joint Transportation Reserve Unit. Lenny Rishu now leads the JEC. We have 6 COCOM J4s in the audience. That's a pretty big deal. Our newest teammates, our new Chief of Staff is Major General Jay Flournoy, right down here. It's great to have him on the team. Dan McMillan is rejoining the team from having been in TRANSCOM some years ago, and we have him back. Let me tell you, that's a great privilege to have an SES-3 back at TRANSCOM. Major General Ricky Rupp, who's now our J3, is in the audience, and one of my favorite new guys is Pete Clark. Where's Pete? Hey, Pete, what's your background, Pete?
I'm a submariner.
Okay, and what do you do for us now?
I'm the strategy, policy, and logistics director.
And you're a submariner, okay.
And that may be the perfect choice.
And so how are you coming on your journey that I've given you?
You know, after 3 months, I've got most of the words spelled out. I think I'm up to about T.
Yeah, I told him he needed to learn to spell logistics.
And next, I'll work on using it in a second.
Okay, good.
Again, sir, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. That's not what your wife said when she showed up in the cornfields of Illinois. She goes, honey, there's actually no water here. Another teammate is Lieutenant General John Broadmeadow. Down here somewhere, our Marine, only the second Marine to be the Deputy Commander of U.S. Transportation Command. And as a matter of fact, at our most recent 30-year anniversary ball, we had the other Marine that was there, and a former Commandant of the Marine Corps there speaking. But John Broadmeadow is here for a couple of reasons. One, I needed somebody that could have big enough feet to step in the big shoes of TCDC number 14, who's right down there, and 13, who's right over here. But he's a combat-proven Marine. He's played a pivotal role in every single Marine Corps' toughest fight since 9/11. He's deployed 7 times, twice during that time as a commander. He's commanded at every single level, and I have found the best deputies in the world are the ones who could run the organization in their own right. And we're proud to have him as our 15th deputy, and that's John Broadmeadow, and his wife Karen, who's even better. We went through the Honorable Buzz Busby. He's there. It's great to have him here. And my thank you as well to Don Dietrich, Bill Woodhour, and their roles and their leadership. And I won't go through all the other stuff. So let's get to what we have here. Where are we? So I've gotten all my thank yous done. So here we're going to go. This is the beginning of a series of speeches I will do over the next few weeks. And I'm sorry if you're going to be at all 3 of them. So it'll sound pretty familiar. Here, and then AOTUS, and then Airlift Tanker Association Convention. And my obligation then is to help the industry and understand where we are and where we're headed. So we just had our 30th anniversary. 30 years of one of the most successful organizations in the Department of Defense. I'm a little bit biased. And what we did was we had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff speak at our ball. He spoke about power projection. He spoke about his great affinity for U.S. Transcom. He talked about our great history. He talked about our proud legacy and our heritage. He took 2 hours of photos and handshakes after he was done speaking. He didn't sit for 2 hours and shook every single hand and took every selfie with every person that wanted to do that. He did it for one simple reason. He gets us. He completely understands how much this organization, this industry has to do with the nation's ability to project power. This has been another incredibly busy year. Every year I stand up here and say that. And you ought to take pride in knowing that you've impacted so many things around the world. I've got another hero video, so let's go ahead and roll it.
The U.S. is blaming the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad for a deadly chemical attack on its own people.
Tried in as many as 100 people killed, according to some.
For the second consecutive night, Russia flew 2 long-range nuclear-capable Bear bombers off the coast of Alaska, this time coming within 36 miles of mainland Alaska.
We're just learning that tonight's violence in London has been officially declared a terrorist incident. In addition to the hit and run with a van, there were also multiple stabbings.
U.S.-backed Iraqi forces are edging ever closer to recapturing the key Iraqi city of Mosul.
Hurricane Harvey gaining steam as it gets set to slam into Texas.
A pair of armed Chinese fighter jets buzzed a U.S. Navy spy plane happening over the East China Sea on
the first images of North Korea's ominous new missile launch, a rare nighttime launch that traveled higher, farther, and longer than any of it.
You know, that whole country, Venezuela, is just falling into oblivion here.
The 7.5 magnitude quake struck the city of Tecpan, north of Acapulco. Now, the quake was felt.
Hurricane Irma is putting the Orlando area on alert as thousands arrive seeking refuge from South Florida.
Tonight, Maria's direct hit devastating Puerto Rico.
Hurricane Maria slamming into the island, and as you heard, one official saying the island is destroyed.
So I get the chance to remind you of all the things that have transpired that you tend to take for granted. What we tend to do is we have these things roll off our backs. We're right in the middle of one. We roll to the next one. We don't even take a chance to take a breath, and it's on to the next one. You will never, ever get mentioned in the history books. You don't get your names said on television, but that's okay. The job is, in fact, thankless. We won't get that history recognition. But I want to remind you that you are, in fact, the true heroes in this nation, in my opinion. And it's my job to stand up here and make sure at least once a year you hear it. At events like this, it's easy to spend a lot of time talking about the past, and I'm going to do a little bit of that. But what I really want to do is focus on the future and how I think the changes in the world today will impact us in the years to come. To get there, I want to talk about what makes us who we are and how that affects the way we think about the future. We'll have to travel a little bit back in time, but by the end of my presentation, my hope is that we're thinking forward instead of looking back. First, I have another video for you. Most of you have seen at least 2 versions of this hero video, and this year I think the team knocked it out of the park, and it'll give you a chance, well, I'll give you a chance to be a judge. Please.
It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
I got a chance this week to tell the President of the United States, when all the COCOMs and service chiefs met with him, what is it about this enterprise that I value so much and what he should value. And what I told him was, we are the reason we're a superpower. And you are the heroes of this enterprise. And I hope that you get that. I've stood on this stage, this is my third time standing here, trying to convince you that you're the answer to the solutions we need going forward. I've tried to convince you that the facts are there, that plenty of people will try to tell you no and convince you that it can't be done. Look back at the first two videos and all the things you have accomplished, but really let's look forward to what we need yet to do. The team found this quote, and I think it's really, really good. A guy by the name of Brooks Atkinson, mid-20th century theater critic and journalist, said, "This nation was built by those who took risks. Pioneers who were not afraid of failure, scientists who were not afraid of the truth, thinkers who were not afraid of progress, and dreamers who were not afraid of action." I've tried to convince you to overcome your fears. I've tried to convince you to leave your doubts behind. I've tried to convince you that using your experiences are what you should be doing. These same attributes of the people that built this nation and built all the enterprises that you now are a part of were facing doubts and challenges and fears and many things that would hold them back. An example, there are several quotes I'm going to run you through right now, and you won't be able to believe what was said about the technology I'm about to introduce. Let's roll that first quote up there. Do you think they're talking about a rocket belt or maybe Twitter toilet paper? And that's actually a thing, by the way. Give me the next slide. That was actually a British Parliament person talking about the light bulb. You might consider that guy to be wrong today. Give me the next quote. No, it wasn't the hovercraft. Give me the next build. There was a time when you didn't have an office that didn't have one of these in it. Now, some of you don't know, this is a fax machine. So it's been replaced. Some of you might not know that too. Actually, it hasn't been replaced in the U.S. Senate, but that's another story altogether. I'm not kidding. There was a time when the majority of the workforce couldn't survive without it. How about this one? Solar power, maybe? 3D printers? Give me the next one. Yeah, so can you imagine life without this little tidbit? I would have loved to have come up with this one. Give me the next one. Armored car, maybe? Personal submarine? No, give me the next. Can you imagine a device now, your life, without a device with an I in front of it? iPad, iHouse, iCar. So you can imagine, just imagine what was said. And then, give me the next one, please. What do you think they're talking about? Give me the next build, please. Actually, not that. Give me one more build. It was that little invention that they were talking about. What in the world were they thinking? There was a guy by the name of Ferdinand Foch in 1903 who said that about the airplane. And these are just a few examples in history where people, experts in their field, spent time debating why something wouldn't work. But I'm glad we had Edison and the Wright brothers and a few others that spent more time worrying about how it would work, or even better, how it could change the world if it did. Innovation is more than just coming up with new ideas, it's having the willingness to implement them. The naysayers throughout history were those who were afraid to take risks, afraid of failure, and dare I suggest, I think, lost their ability to dream. And they maybe were afraid of the truth. Nothing is immune to this fear. When the concept of U.S. Transcom was first emerged, the possibility came about because of a Goldwater-Nichols Act. We were told back then it couldn't be done. As a matter of fact, some said it shouldn't be done. I've got the staff summary sheet to prove it. Or they voted to not do it. There are those who fought hard against the concept, even our own services, and initially Transcom was only authorized to act in times of war. The commander was dual-hatted with primary duties at Air Mobility Command. Later, the command would get its own commander. The command approved itself during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, especially after the role was expanded. After that, there was no question of our value, and we were given peacetime authorities to go with those wartime authorities. After 9/11, everything changed. Our roles and missions expanded even further, and the DoD assigned Transcom its own commander. Today, Transcom is not just a command, not just something born out of necessity, not just a command that was tested and hardened in battle. Transcom's much more than that. We are now a distribution process owner because of people like John Handy pushed for it. He saw something that no one else could see. And when I sat down with him and talked to him about why he pushed hard for an authority like distribution process owner, is because he said it was because that's all they could give me at the time. He thought of even more. There are people that still don't believe the concept of strategic logistics, mobility, and this enterprise should be coupled together and will work for the good that it does. We started to do some things differently, and I have been committed to that change for a while. When I first stood up here, I think I used a blockbuster analogy to tell my story about where is that blockbuster today. But it's not enough to use an example about not just failing. We got to decide how we in fact got here. I have a few ideas, but first I want to share a theory with you. There are some sociologists, and I'm a civil engineer undergrad, so I don't know much about this, but I've read just a little bit, that says that humans are value programmed between the ages of 11 and 12 years old. Your value programming is a result of a foundation built upon your education, your experiences, and once they're locked in, it sets a baseline for your thought and your behavior. The decisions you make every day thereafter are influenced by your past. I believe that in adult life, we have a similar value programming. As you grow in your career, you're programmed by your training, your leaders, and your successes and your challenges and your experiences. Your value programming will make you think through the lens you've always thought through, whether it still applies or not. That doesn't matter. It's your lens. You will repeat patterns, you will repeat behaviors, and you will perpetuate bad behaviors sometimes, and you'll do them all because it's your comfort zone. If you allow yourself, you can be shackled by your own perceived notions and biases, and you won't even realize it. 35 years ago, I've got a confession to make, I was a cold warrior. I spent many days and nights on an alert facility in Strategic Air Command. I was ready for the most complex world I could imagine, fighting the Soviet Union, waiting for the big one. I was value programmed that way, and I spent, along with many of my peers and superiors, every waking moment and some sleeping moments preparing to go toe-to-toe with the Soviets in the Fulda Gap. Now, how do you think that generation of warriors feels about Russians? Can we unshackle ourselves from that? It's very difficult to see it through any other lens. Can we avoid seeing them as anything other than a threat? What did that mean for the force we built, for the organizations we built, for the ways we structured ourselves? Then you have the Desert Shield and Stormers, a decade of training to crush the enemy with overwhelming force, validated in the Arabian Desert. The senior leaders of that time grew up in Vietnam. In fact, the Powell Doctrine was a direct result of a young captain experiencing that war that saw decisions coming from Washington, D.C., feeling as though he was fighting with one hand behind his back. He never wanted to see his country find itself in a quagmire of protracted war again. With Powell as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we now had an all-volunteer force. We trained hard, we brought overwhelming force to the enemy, and were able to reap the benefits in that conflict. Finally, we have the post-9/11 military, where everything starts with why. Everyone in this room has a story of where they were on 9/11, and many have stories to go on with what followed. We fought using terms like COIN, security cooperation, and we did things with equipment that brought to theater, and we kept it there. And we fell on that equipment for decades. We didn't deploy, we sustained for 16 years. Decisions were back in D.C., at least the strategic ones, but tactical decisions with strategic importance were being made on the ground. Our senior leaders had more access to more information than ever before in history, and they weren't afraid to use it. We have a mix in the force today of all those kind of generations, but what are we building in today's force? Today, I believe the changing character of war will define our time. The most significant changes are a result of emerging technology, volatile geopolitics, shifting demographics. These considerations are not only changing societies and the way we fight, they're also changing why, how, and where wars are fought as well, and who is fighting them. Wars in the future will transcend geographic boundaries, with globally networked information consumers swimming in a sea of disinformation. These wars might be fought against a technologically advanced and numerically superior adversary. We will likely have to transport and sustain dispersed forces over long, contested lines of communication. The tactics, techniques, and procedures that made us successful in the past will not be the same as the ones that will ensure success in the future. Today, no other nation can do what we do. There are a couple of great powers in the world, but there's still only one superpower. And I just said that to the president. The difference between them and us is our ability to project power at the time and place of our choosing, anywhere in the world, any time we choose, all the time. We have to preserve that capability, and it starts with the people in this room. Each of us has a role to play. Consider a scenario that happened on the 22nd of June of 2017. 20 American vessels operating in the Black Sea reported to the U.S. Maritime Administration that their GPS was malfunctioning. It was displaying their position 25 miles away from where they actually were, on land, at an airport. All the while, their systems were reporting that the data was safe within 100 meters. Because a regional actor was spoofing their systems, we put so much faith in these digital tools that we often take their veracity and their security for granted. But what happens when the actions of an adversary shake our confidence? Can we trust our systems? More importantly, can we trust ourselves if and when we realize an adversary has compromised our digital networks? Our adversary doesn't have to stop us. All they have to do is slow us down. All they have to really do is simply have us doubt the accuracy of our own data. We will then check and double check and check again, and we're really good at it. By the time we figure it all out, it'll be too late. Our adversaries will have already achieved their strategic objectives, not using bombs and bullets, but using ones and zeros. It is the reality of our time. It doesn't matter if we have the biggest military or the best equipment if we can't get it to where it needs to go. It doesn't matter. Assured power projection is an imperative that we can no longer take for granted. In my confirmation hearing for my current job 2 years ago, I was asked by the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He was trying to paint me into a box by this question because he was fighting over whether or not we were going to rank the threats out there 1 to N, and he wanted me to say what I thought the number one threat was. He expected me to say Russia or China was number one. He was trying to pin me into that box. And I said simply, cyber. It shocked him. And I then said, cyber because I don't care where it comes from. I know that's the threat. The entire defense enterprise, all of DOD, 2 years ago, wasn't ready to hear that answer. Much of the nation isn't ready to hear it today. But it is, that domain challenge is seriously one of the challenges of our time. By that time, I had already made my decision that this is where we were headed. That's one of our 4 command priorities is cyber. I didn't think we were giving enough emphasis on cyber at that point in our history, and it needed 4-star CEO-level attention. This is not the purview of your IT specialist. They are great humans, but since then we've had experts from government, industry, and academia, and a very talented pink-haired hacker join us for cyber roundtables. And we have advanced our knowledge level about the cyber domain. Now we know where we should be afraid. I asked my team to conduct a contested environment war game. We had a number of eye-opening results. One of them was a word that we haven't used in this enterprise in 70-plus years. The word is attrition. Everybody assumes our stuff will get there on time, every time. We can't rest on that assumption. It's the first item on my list when I go to the meetings in the tank. Every single time. As a matter of fact, I've become such a broken record that I no longer have to say it. I sit back now and everyone else talks about it. The other epiphany came out of the war game, and there were many others, is that we could be the soft underbelly for the Department of Defense when it comes to cyber. No one wants to think of themselves as a soft underbelly. All of our logistics and global movement operations are coordinated on unclassified and commercial networks. Yet the COCOMs treat their planners like mushrooms. They keep them in a cool, dark place with no windows, and they feed them rich fertilizer. We create war plans on secure networks, but out of necessity, we execute via commercial partners on unsecure commercial networks. And we do this despite having an industry standard for cybersecurity. I'm pressing you hard to get there. It's not going to be comfortable, but we have to get there. It's our wake-up call. Some might have thought that Hurricanes Irma, Harvey, and Maria were that wake-up call. Catastrophic impact on our ability to provide logistic support in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. We saw those coming. Imagine what happens if it's not a natural disaster, but that kind of impact comes from someone that decides to hack our systems. How in the world do we just go back to what many think is go back to analog? We can't. We can't. We can't make a phone call without a digital system. The presence of our adversaries and their illicit actors in the cyber domain presents, I believe, the biggest threat to our decisive logistics advantage. Yes, we're the only world superpower, but we can't afford that our dominance will not be challenged. I guarantee you it is being challenged right now. Only a short time ago, U.S. Transcom was admiring that problem. We're now, I'm proud to say, leading the discussion in the Department of Defense. We've turned the corner. With the help of you and many experts, we're shaping a vision for mission assurance in the cyber-threatened, cyber-degraded environments. And we're making actionable changes to improve our cyber posture. Actionable changes. First, we're sprinting to the cloud. We're going to get better encryption, better security. We're going to empower trusted transactions between us and you. We're going to increase our storage capacity. And unlike those static server stacks, the cloud gives you a mission-tailored, scalable configuration for our data processing. We need surge capacity all the time. But now we'll be able to do it instantaneously. And we only pay for the capacity we're using at any given time, not paying for all that capacity in a single room somewhere. It's our future. Our future's in data. We're working hard to get around this concept called big data. In doing so, someday, very soon, we'll harness advanced algorithms and machine learning and maybe even artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, capabilities that all those naysayers couldn't see happening are here today. And our adversaries are already there in many of these cases. Finally, in line with our big data initiative, we are in the midst of conducting a transportation management system proof of principle. I told a secret to the command. It's not a proof of whether or not it will work. It's a proof of principle on when we start implementing it. At one of our cyber roundtables, we had a senior executive from a national retail chain who said this: "I can't imagine how you're doing what you're doing without one." I can't either. And since the Congress screwed up a couple years ago and put me in charge, we won't be without one for long. We're going to figure this out. If you pick up your smartphone and ask it anything, that's the power of data. As an enterprise, we have got to harness that power, but we have to also acknowledge the risks, not run from the risks, not be afraid of the risks, not say that the risk will take down the lights, but acknowledge what's out there. We're inextricably linked to information, but data is the only piece of the puzzle that I'm interested in. Cyber defenses must be integral and baked into everything we do going forward, and we have to have an actual rigorous industry standard, including self-reporting. Some of you are already on board. Now I need the rest of you on board. We must move forward together as an enterprise, as an industry, and we have to bring society with us. We can't do it alone. We have lots of other areas of examples of whole-of-society solutions. and one of them is public health. As you look at the public health scenario, we taught our kids what it meant to cover your mouth when you coughed and cough into your elbow. And my daughter once challenged me on cutting up a six-pack, those little plastic things that are on a six-pack of sodas, to cut that up before I put it in the recycle bin because it might hurt fish. All of those things were part of a whole-of-society approach to a challenge we saw. Well, where's our whole-of-society approach to the norms and standards of cyber protection? Public health is a shared responsibility. Cyber protection is a shared responsibility. Everyone from government to the private sector has to be involved. Disease is going to still occur, and people are still going to get sick. But it's what we do when the bad things happen that makes the difference. And I also believe it's how many people we have practicing the good solutions. Imagine what it would be like if we hadn't taught kids to cover their mouths when they cough during some of the epidemics that we've seen over the last few years. We've got to get to a place as a society where we treat cyber and digital technology the way we treat public health. From parental controls we put on our children's electronics to our educational system, why aren't we teaching more about this in schools? The Estonians teach coding in elementary school. Why? They must. So should we. We have got to inculcate a collective defense for this existential threat that presents itself in the cyber domain. Just cloistering it in DoD is not the answer. The answer to the future will be found in our templates of the past, but a lot of it was in that time, their time, but this is our time. And we need you more today than we ever have. None of this would be possible without people like you who have the courage to take risks, the audacity to fail quickly, the intellectual curiosity to discover the truth. And if we want to continue our success in the future, we have to challenge and change. And we've got to do it together. How is your value programming holding you back? I know what my value programming is. I know where my blind spots are. How are you going to leverage the experience of your past without allowing it to shackle you? Someone in this room is the pioneer who will push on in the face of failure. Someone in this room is the scientist who will uncover the truth. Someone in the room is the thinker who will resolve the greatest issues of our time. Someone in the room is a dreamer who will make their dreams a reality. Which ones are you? Edison or Ferdinand Foch, who thought how silly that little airplane thing idea was going to be? Are you spending more time proving something won't work or trying to figure out how it will? Are you able to imagine a world 30 years in the future? A world that will likely look nothing like the one we know today. A world that we will build together. I bet you can. It's one of the biggest bets I'm making. It's that American society will figure this out and will bet on our future. I bet you can. I bet you will. And our nation absolutely depends on it. Thanks, and let's have a great meeting.
Thank you, General McDew. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your challenge to us. And I left my glasses down on the table there. But I think I can get there. No. Thanks, Nick. Normally we would have taken questions, but General McDew was very inspired today. And, but I do just want to say that General McDew has carved a lot of time out this week to be here. And I